somewhere behind your eyes right now, there is a type of cell most people have never heard of. It is not a rod. It is not a cone. Scientists not even confirm it existed in humans until the early 2000s. And depending on what you do in the next 10 minutes, that cell is about to help decide something bigger than how awake you feel this morning. It is going to help decide whether you are one of the people who makes it to 95 still gardening, still walking to the store, still arguing with your grandkids about politics, or one of the people who does not. This is not about a supplement. It is not about a diet. It happens before you have even had your coffee. I spent about 3 weeks pulling apart circadian biology research for this one, because the claim sounded too simple to be true. 30 more years, just from your morning? That belongs in a supplement ad, not a science video. But here is the thing. Average life expectancy at 65 is around 18 more years in most developed countries. The people who get 30 more, the ones who make it into their 90s and past 100, stay functional, still independent, keep showing up in the same research for the same reason. Not a pill, not a genetic lottery ticket, a pattern in how they start the day. Do you wake up already tired? Do you need coffee before you feel like a person? Does your energy crash by 3 in the afternoon, no matter how much you slept the night before? That is not just bad luck. There is a mechanism behind it, and it starts in your eyes. Here is what is actually happening in there when you wake up. That cell I mentioned is called an intrinsically photosensitive retinic ganglion cell. Nobody says that out loud, so let us just call it a light-sensing cell. Inside these cells is a light-sensitive pigment called melanopsin. Unlike the rods and cones you use for vision, melanopsin is not trying to build an image of the world. Its job is much simpler. Tell your brain how bright the world is and, therefore, what time of day it probably is. That is why these cells do not help you see shapes or colors. Instead, they measure how bright the world is right now and report that single number to a structure deep in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. The SCN is your master clock. Not a metaphorical clock, an actual cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons in your hypothalamus, keeping time whether you pay attention to it or not. Here is the part that surprised researchers for a long time. Your internal clock does not run on exactly 24 hours. In a landmark study, Harvard sleep researcher Charles Sessler kept volunteers in a lab with no clocks, no windows, no cues about time at all, and tracked their body temperature and hormone rhythms for weeks. The average intrinsic cycle came out to about 24 hours and 11 minutes. 11 minutes does not sound like much. Stay with it, because it matters. Without a reset signal, your body clock drifts later every single day, like a radio slowly sliding off its station, picking up static instead of the broadcast. Bright light hitting those light-sensing cells first thing in the morning is the tuning knob. It is what pulls the signal back on frequency, every day, before the drift can add up into anything you would notice. Here is the catch. Your ancestors never had to think about this. The sunrise did the job automatically. Step outside, and your brain instantly knew the day had begun. Modern life replaced sunrise with bedroom ceilings, office lighting, and glowing phone screens. Even a brightly lit room is only a fraction as intense as natural daylight, which is why your internal clock often never gets the strong morning signal it evolved to expect. So what happens once the SCN gets that signal? It begins coordinating nearly every major system in your body. One of the first is cortisol. Contrary to what you have probably heard, cortisol first thing in the morning is not the villain. In a healthy, well-timed system, cortisol rises by 50% or more in the first 30 to 45 minutes after you wake. That is called the cortisol awakening response, and it is not stress, it is ignition. It mobilizes glucose for energy, sharpens alertness, and primes your immune system for the day ahead. The problem was never cortisol showing up. It is cortisol showing up at the wrong time, weakly, or not with any real force at all. There is a second clock in this story, and it is just as important. Your core body temperature. It hits its nadir about 2 hours before your habitual wake time, then climbs from there. If that climb starts on schedule, you wake up feeling like your body is already moving in the right direction. If your sleep-wake timing has drifted, that temperature curve drifts with it, and you wake up feeling like you are swimming upstream before your feet even hit the floor. And this is where it stops being about feeling groggy and starts being about aging. The SCN does not just run your sleep-wake cycle. It synchronizes what researchers call peripheral clocks, smaller versions of that same 24-hour rhythm, running inside your liver, your muscles, your fat tissue, even your immune cells. Think of your body as an orchestra. The SCN is the conductor. Every organ knows its part, but they all rely on the conductor to keep the same tempo. Lose the conductor, and the music does not stop. It slowly falls out of harmony. When the master clock and the peripheral clocks fall out of sync, something chronobiologists call circadian alignment, the consequences are not cosmetic. Research links it to impaired glucose handling, disrupted lipid metabolism, and immune cells that patrol less effectively than they should. Do that once, and you feel jet lagged for a day. Do it every day for 20 years, because you never gave your master clock a strong enough morning signal, and you are looking at a body that ages faster than it has to. This is not just theory. Northwestern researcher Kristen Knutson and her colleagues followed roughly 400,000 people in a UK biobank study for about 6.5 years, sorting them by whether they were natural morning types or natural evening types. The evening types, the night owls, had about a 10% higher risk of dying during the study period, even after accounting for how much sleep they would gotten. 10% just from which end of the day your biology leans toward. And here is the hopeful part. Chronotype is not fixed in stone. The single strongest lever for shifting it is the exact mechanism we just walked through: light in your eyes, early. I tested this on myself for 6 weeks because reading about a mechanism and living inside one are different things. Before, my wake-up time varied by 2 hours or more depending on the day. I would check my phone within 30 seconds of waking up, stay indoors until I absolutely had to leave, and rely on 2, sometimes 3 cups of coffee before noon just to feel like a functioning adult. For 6 weeks, I got outside within 30 minutes of waking, no sunglasses, rain or shine, and held off on coffee for at least an hour. I also started tracking my resting heart rate variability, mostly out of curiosity about whether any of this was doing anything measurable. By week 4, my average HRV was up around 15%. I was falling asleep close to 20 minutes faster at night. And the 3 o'clock crash, the one I would basically accepted as a personality trait at this point, mostly stopped showing up. I am one person. That is not a study. But it matched the mechanism closely enough that it stopped feeling like a coincidence to me. And that is when I realized something. This was not about becoming a morning person. It was about giving my biology the information it had been asking for all along. So that is the core mechanism. But that is only part of the story. There are a few more reasons your morning specifically, not your afternoon, not your evening, carries this much weight. Let us go through them. Reason number 1. Blood pressure has its own morning problem. Blood pressure and platelet activity both rise sharply in the first few hours after waking, a pattern researchers called the morning surge. Cardiologists like Kazuo Mikario, who has spent decades studying this specifically, have linked an exaggerated version of that surge to a higher risk of stroke and heart attack in vulnerable people. A consistent morning, as opposed to jolting awake to an alarm, grabbing your phone, and immediately scanning email, appears to soften that surge instead of amplifying it. Same body, same morning. Very different cardiovascular experience. Reason number 2. Your muscles are listening at breakfast, specifically. Muscle protein synthesis. The process that rebuilds and maintains muscle tissue responds to protein intake, but aging muscle becomes less efficient at using it, something researchers call anabolic resistance. Douglas Patton-Jones, who studies muscle aging at the University of Texas Medical Branch, has shown that spreading protein evenly across the day, instead of loading most of it at dinner the way a lot of people do, produces meaningfully better muscle maintenance in older adults. A protein-forward breakfast is not a bodybuilding gimmick at 65. It is one of the more direct tools against sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss, which is itself one of the strongest predictors of losing independence in your final decades. Strong muscles are not just about looking fit. They are about who gets to keep living in their own house. Reason number 3. Your immune system runs on the same clock. Immune cells, neutrophils, natural killer cells, the ones that patrol for infection, and abnormal cells, have their own daily rhythms in when they are most active and where in the body they concentrate. When the master clock is well synchronized, that patrol runs on schedule. When it is not, researchers see elevated markers of chronic, low-grade inflammation, a pattern some in the field now call inflammaging, because it behaves less like a disease and more like a slow background fire that never fully goes out. Almost every major disease of aging, from heart disease to certain cancers to cognitive decline, has inflammaging somewhere in its backstory. Reason number 4. Your nervous system needs a smooth transition, not a jolt. Overnight, your body runs in a more parasympathetic state, rest and digest. Waking is supposed to be a gradual shift into a more alert, sympathetic state, not a slammed gear change. A blaring alarm, an immediate phone check, and a caffeine hit before your body's even started that shift all force it to happen abruptly instead of gradually. That is part of why I was tracking my own heart rate variability during that 6-week test. It is a rough marker of how smoothly this transition goes. A steadier, light and movement-led wake-up tends to produce a steadier climb into alertness, instead of the spike and crash pattern a lot of people mistake for normal morning grogginess. Reason number 5, and this one's less biochemical, more behavioral. How you feel at 7 a.m. predicts what you do for the rest of the day. A well-timed morning, daylight, movement, steady energy instead of a caffeine cliff makes you measurably more likely to exercise later, eat better at lunch, and get to bed on time that night. A rough, foggy morning makes all 3 of those less likely. Longevity research keeps circling back to the same unglamorous truth. It is rarely one dramatic thing that adds decades. It is thousands of small, boring decisions, and your morning sets the odds for almost all of them for 9 a.m. Here is where most people get this wrong. Mistake number 1. Reaching for your phone first. A phone screen at arm's length is nowhere near bright enough to trigger the light-sensing cells, the way outdoor light does. Even a gray, overcast sky is typically 10 times brighter than a well-lit room, so you end up spending your first 10 minutes broadcasting on completely the wrong frequency. Mistake number 2. Staying behind glass. Window glass does not block visible light much on its own, but combined with people usually standing farther from a window than they think, indoor light often is not strong enough to do the job. You need to actually be outside. Mistake number 3. Wildly different wake times on weekends. Chronobiologists have a name for this. Social jet lag, and sleeping in by 2 or 3 hours on Saturday is, biologically, close to flying to time zones and back every single week. Mistake number 4. Caffeine within the first hour. It blunts your natural cortisol rise and mostly just borrows energy from later in the day, rather than creating any. Mistake number 5. Skipping breakfast entirely, or defaulting to something carbohydrate heavy, with almost no protein, which misses the muscle maintenance window we talked about in reason number 2. How to actually build this without overhauling your life overnight. Step 1. Start with 5 minutes outside, no phone, whatever the weather is doing. Step 2. Once that is automatic, add a short walk, even 5 to 10 minutes, moves you from passive light exposure to light plus movement, which compounds the effect. Step 3. Pick one wake-up time and hold it within 30 minutes, 7 days a week, for 2 full weeks before touching anything else. Step 4. Once the timing is stable, add the protein-forward breakfast. Step 5. Push your first coffee back by about 15 minutes each week until you land somewhere around 60 to 90 minutes after waking. A few safety notes, especially if you are doing this in your 60s, 70s, or beyond. Skip the sunglasses during this specific window. You want that light actually reaching your eyes, but keep total direct exposure modest. 10 to 20 minutes is plenty. You are not trying to tan. Watch your footing on morning walks, especially on uneven pavement before your body's fully warmed up. And if you are on blood pressure medication, particularly anything related to that morning surge we talked about, it is worth mentioning your new routine to whoever manages your prescriptions, since timing changes can occasionally matter. Here is the part that made me take all of this more seriously than a typical morning routine tip. Researchers who study aging at the cellular level talk about a handful of core drivers behind why we age at all. Things like mitochondrial dysfunction, cellular senescence, and chronic inflammation. Circadian rhythm is not just loosely connected to that list. It sits upstream of a surprising number of items on it, because so many of your body's repair and cleanup processes are themselves scheduled to specific hours, largely set by that same master clock. Thomas Perls has spent more than 2 decades running the New England Centenarian Study out of Boston University, tracking people who live past 100. He is not a circadian researcher by training, but one of the patterns that keeps showing up in his interviews with centenarians, again and again, is how regular their days are, consistent wake times, consistent routines, none of the wild variability that defines a lot of modern adult life. Nobody's claiming a strict morning routine adds 30 years all on its own. Genetics matters, so does luck. But when researchers study the people who do get those extra decades, this pattern shows up often enough that it stopped looking like a coincidence to me a long time ago. Notice something interesting? None of these steps are expensive. None require perfect genetics. What they do require is consistency. Your biology does not reward intensity nearly as much as it rewards rhythm. So here is the whole thing, distilled into a routine you could start tomorrow. Step 1. Wake at the same time. Within 30 minutes, every single day, yes, including weekends. Step 2. Get outside within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. No sunglasses. 10 to 20 minutes. Cloudy days count. Step 3. Move while you are out there. A walk beats standing still. Step 4. Eat a protein-forward breakfast within about 2 hours of waking. Step 5. Hold off on coffee for 60 to 90 minutes. No pill, no prescription, no gym membership required. Consistent wake time. Real outdoor light. Some movement. Protein at breakfast. Coffee held back a little. That is the whole list. If this helped make sense of why mornings matter more than you would assumed, hit like. Subscribe to Feynman Decoded for more of the hidden mechanisms behind the habits that actually work, and let me know in the comments if you tried this. I want to hear what changes after a few weeks, not just tomorrow. And send this to someone who could use it. A parent still figuring out what aging well actually looks like. Someone you are hoping sticks around for a lot longer than 18 more years. Your body already has a clock built for this. It has just been waiting for you to set it properly. Tomorrow morning, your body will ask the same question it asks every single day. What time is it? The first light your eyes see will become the answer. And over thousands of mornings, those answers quietly become your health.